Welcome to The Happy Writer, a show about creating and sustaining a long-term author career. My name is Patty Jansen, writer of science fiction and fantasy. I've published independently since 2011. This show covers motivation, diversification, learning new skills, and your place in your career. Come on in and be happy. In episode 71 of The Happy Writer, I'm going to look at some advice that you will hear in writers' groups about when you should start advertising. I think the subject is an excellent example of where well-intentioned advice can be taken the wrong way and actually be harmful. When a beginning writer asks in a group about their upcoming book and when they should start advertising, they are likely to get several different types of advice. One is that you should start to build buzz before the book is published, that you should put a lot of effort into the book launch and fine-tune it to the nth degree, that you should book, read, stress out about promotions and book blogs and influencers and be on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok all at the same time, and you should have a launch schedule pages long. Try to get on podcasts and attend events to let as many people as possible know about your book. And another piece of advice is that you should hold off on all advertising until you have a couple of books out. These are obviously a couple of widely different and incompatible pieces of advice, so which is true? As you should probably know by now, there is no absolute truth in publishing, so those pieces of advice can probably still hold true for different people when they publish. So I will address a few of these statements and get some indication when advice might hold true for you and when it probably wouldn't. One of the major problems with starting as a self-published author and getting your book to sell is getting people to know who you are. When you first start, you are likely to have no mailing list, no large group of people who are wanting to buy your books. No one knows who you are, and therefore you need to advertise. This does not need to be paid ads, but you do need to have some sort of way for readers to find out about your book. Let's unpack some of this advice. Should you advertise a pre-order to try to create buzz? I don't like that word, but never mind. While the list sites won't take your money before the book is published, and some even ask for a certain number of reviews, you can advertise books on pre-order on Amazon, Facebook, and BookBub pay-per-click ads. They will happily take your money. But does it make sense? Think about which people are most likely to pre-order books. 1. Your fans. 2. People who are certain they'll want the book and won't want to forget to order it. When you're new, you don't have any people in the first group, and the second group are most likely to be fans of an existing series. An average person is more likely to buy a product when they can immediately act on it. Pre-orders break this chain because if you send traffic to a pre-order, people cannot buy it and start reading straight away, so this is a huge enthusiasm killer. If it's your first book, there isn't even anything else they can buy instead. That is just frustrating. You could try to entice them with a discount, but honestly, few people are going to lie awake over the difference between 99 cents and $5. However, if these people were already waiting for your book to come out, they would pre-order, because they might otherwise be afraid they would forget to do it later. Pre-orders are for those people. They are for the people who already know that they want the book. Pre-orders are for an existing fan base. Advertising to pre-orders primarily works for those people. I remember having seen only one case where a new writer got an extraordinary number of pre-orders through advertising. It turned out that that writer already had a fan base from another related activity, and the boost in pre-orders came from that group. So no, you probably shouldn't start pointing expensive ads to your pre-order if this is your first book. Should you then have a big launch? You can, if you're that way inclined, but it is a lot of work to contact all the people and write all the blog posts, and many authors don't have the time or don't have the connections to get mentioned by the people who can really shift the dial. Sometimes you see people breaking out with a launch, but very often it turns out they were launching a pen name and they already have an audience. However, advertising in a few places soon after the launch is not a bad idea, especially if it gets people onto your mailing list. You should at this point be geared towards expanding your audience and making sure that when you publish the next book, people who like this one have not forgotten about you. A mailing list sign-up should always be in the front and the back of your book and on your website or whatever other internet presence you have. When you launch a book, it is a good idea to start directing people to this sign-up, and it's probably also a good idea to start trying out some of the different types of ads. But because you only have one book, if there is nothing else for the reader to buy afterwards, those ads are unlikely to be profitable. It's not entirely impossible, but more likely than not, the only thing you will gain from advertising your first book is a few sales and some sign-ups for your mailing list, and none of that is going to be immediately profitable. At this stage, your main enemy is invisibility, and you might be better off spending $150 for a membership at BookFunnel and give this first book free to everyone who signs up for your mailing list. Again, this is a hard slog, because those people are not guaranteed to become your fans, but it is a good way of starting to build an audience. Ideally, what you want to use advertising for is that when you launch your book, you get a bunch of sales all at once, and the retailers start recommending your book to readers of similar books. The more sales you get, the more this will happen. So this is the main reason why people like to juice their launches. But this is a ball that is very hard to get rolling if you have just one book, and it's even harder if you are prone to feeling frustrated about the lack of return on investment on your ads, and if this is a big problem for you. And the reality is that everything, including paid ads, becomes more useful and more profitable the more books you have. The bigger your existing audience, the easier it is to advertise to them and to get sales without advertising much at all. This is the reason why you do this early advertising that's expensive, frustrating, and doesn't appear to work, to get readers and to get people to like your books. But in the beginning, you will be advertising to a lot of people who don't like your kind of fiction, and you have a lot of learning to do about what sort of promotional activities you like doing or are even useful. It is, however, important that you do these activities so that you can collect that information and then repeat it with your next and subsequent launches. Very often, people who ask about when they should start advertising and even want to start advertising the pre-order are new writers with just one book. Advertising a first book may work if you can draw on an existing audience from a related activity. If you worked in a certain field and your novel is about that field, there is nothing wrong with putting up a pre-order and getting a bunch of your friends and colleagues to pre-order the book. I would make it a short pre-order, and I would only start some advertising to it very close to the launch date. Right now I can hear the gasps of horror of people from the advertising community who say that this is a surefire way to pollute your ad algorithms. And while this is true, I would also say that at a very early stage in a writer's career, this is probably not something you need to overly worry much about. You can worry about all that later. Right now, you just want to get some sales and to increase your confidence and just have some fun. You can also do things like give away samples on BookFunnel, but that is most likely to work in fiction, because non-fiction is going to be quite different and more targeted. It's easier to advertise non-fiction. The fact that it's so very hard to turn a profit from advertising just one book, especially if you have to discount it in order to be able to run the promotions, This is the reason why people tell you to only start advertising when you have more books out. Because unless you're very time poor or you plan to launch your first couple of books really close together, I also wouldn't go all out on the ads. I'm willing to bet that none of those people who tell you that you should wait did so themselves. They all started advertising their first book, then found it didn't work, and therefore are passing on that advice. They're advising you based on their own experience, which was that their ads didn't seem to be doing anything until they had more books out. Let's reword that. They didn't notice that the ads worked until they had more books out. But that doesn't mean that early ads to their first and second books had no effect at all. It just meant that their advertising was not profitable, and that they couldn't tell if there was an effect, or that the effect didn't seem to last. Visibility is an S-curve. At the beginning, a writer has very little, and it takes a lot of effort to increase visibility a tiny bit. You have to hand sell every single book and lead every reader by the hand to sign up for your mailing list. But as your audience grows, so does the ease with which it expands. If for every 500 people on your list you have one superfan, when you increase your list to 1,000, the number of superfans double. Superfans are those who repost your ads, who recommend your books to their friends, who write reviews, and who buy your hardcovers. Gaining superfans is a very slow process, and it can be very frustrating, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start it when your first book comes out. In fact, the sooner you can start it, the better. So if you publish your first book and buy some ads and you get 10 sales, let's celebrate that. It's the tough beginning of building a career. If you have a sample up on BookFunnel and give that away for subscribers, it won't be as effective as a full book or a story. But if that's all you have, by all means, start with that. At this stage in your career, you've got to lead every fan by the hand and make sure you keep them there. You may need to be a bit careful about how much money you spend doing this. And to be honest, I'm not sure that spending a lot of money at this stage is such a good use of your advertising budget. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't advertise to increase your audience from the very start. It's just that it's pretty unlikely to be terribly profitable until you have a couple of books out. Start carefully, within your budget. Start at advertising venues that are free, but do start with your first book. Those were my thoughts on when to start advertising. In the next episode, I will talk about self-promotion, where to promote, what is too much and what is too little. Thank you for listening to the Happy Writer Show. Check out links and information about other episodes on my website at pattyjansen.com, where you can also find out about my books. You can support me by subscribing to the show or on Patreon at patreon.com/pattyjansen.